Well, good evening, everyone, and we want to welcome you to episode number 3 of When Life Gets Disrupted. Now, it's wonderful to have my wife with me in this teaching, and what we want to do is we want to take a few minutes to look at a story in the scriptures that deals with a few people whom Jesus loved, who were close friends of him, and just think about what can we learn from their lives and what can we learn from this story. So, we find it in Luke chapter 10, and it deals with Jesus making a visit to some friends of his. And here's what we read. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you're worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. So this is a remarkable story of Jesus going to visit some friends. There's two sisters. The oldest one is named Martha. The younger one is named Mary. And you might remember that they actually had a brother. His name was Lazarus. And so Jesus has gone to their house. Now, can I geek out for a second? Yeah? I'm good at that. What's interesting is that where they lived was a town called Bethany, tiny town on the eastern slopes of the Mount Olives. And it was about 2 miles east of Jerusalem. And at this very time, Jesus has gone to Jerusalem because they're celebrating something called the Feast of Tabernacles. And the Feast of Tabernacles was a time when Israel would remember how God led their ancestors through the desert for all those years as they lived in tents or as they lived in booths. And so once a year they would come back together for this 7-day celebration. They would make these makeshift tents hanging out, and they would remember how God was faithful to be with his people, their ancestors, all those years ago. So if you can imagine, in their day and age, it was a shelter in place that was going on. Well, Jesus skips out of Jerusalem. He joins up with Mary and Martha. We won't tell the rest of it, but these sisters, Jesus runs into them again. You might remember a little bit down the road, their brother Lazarus gets sick and dies. And it's these two sisters who Jesus comes to and ministers to them and raises Lazarus from the dead. Mary also, right before Jesus dies, she's the one who takes that really expensive perfume and anoints his body. Really, symbolically, prophetically, in preparation of his own burial coming up. But those events haven't happened yet. We're in an event where Jesus comes into town. And one thing that was true in those days is that hospitality was just huge in this ancient culture. It still is in many parts of the world. I hope it is somewhat in your home. But I remember when we first met your grandma Margaret. She was a hosting machine.
Yeah, my grandma loved to host, and she didn't go light. It was always meat and mashed potatoes and gravies.
Yes.
And it was the whole thing, a salad and 7 desserts. And I think it's trained me to, if you know me, I always have way too much food.
You can walk into our pantry, which is right over there,
Yeah.
and you could hang out till October. You're going to be okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
Lots of food. But she loved to host, and she was so good at it and gracious. And I didn't really realize till I was an adult how much work it is. And I feel bad now looking back. Probably so many times we were sitting on the couch playing games or watching TV and not helping her. But she was a very good hostess for us.
She was. I remember my first time over there, literally first date at Heather's grandma's house. She was living with her grandma, and she set down like this honking steak. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Like, I picked it up at Fred Meyer's. It's like, this is half a cow. This is going to be amazing.
A lot of steak, yeah.
Well, so Martha has a little bit of Grandma Margaret in her. And here Jesus has come. And by the way, when Jesus came to your door, it wasn't just Jesus. It was Jesus plus his disciples, plus many times the gospel writers talk about how there were others, even women that were involved in the party supporting what was going on. So Jesus and this team of friends come to the door. They love Martha and Mary and Lazarus. It's a natural place for them to land. And now Martha, a.k.a. Grandma Margaret, is stuck hosting them. Now she's delighted to do so, but like all of us, she's frantic. Now, you can't see it, but the dishes right there, they need to be done. The carpet needs to be vacuumed. And so she is just hustling. It is such an honor to have any rabbi in your home, and let alone, this is Jesus in her home. And so there she is. She's just going to work. She's doing dishes. She's getting the pork roast in the oven. She's making sure the bathrooms are loaded with toilet paper. She's doing all that stuff. And as she does it, she notices, like, wait a second. I have a sister who lives in this home with me, and she's doing nothing. And so her frustration just begins to grow. She's not doing anything. The only thing she's doing is soaking up a Bible study at the feet of Jesus. And she gets so irritated that eventually she goes over to Jesus and says, Jesus, you got to help me. Mary is doing nothing. Miss Lazy Pants over there is making me do all the hustle and all the work. Would you put her in her place, and would you tell her to get helping me in the domestic chores that need to be done to host you and your wonderful friends? So Martha comes over to Jesus, and what does Jesus do? Well, Jesus gently corrects her, and Jesus shows her that her priorities, although they were good, they were not the best. And what he says to her is, Martha, you're worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. And we want to talk to you, just some reflection thoughts about this one thing. In other words, what Jesus said is the most important thing right now, in this moment, is not all the hurried things you could do. The most important thing right now in this moment, in this season, is the time you would spend with me building your relationship that will last today and all the days to come. And so we want to talk about, in this season of disruption, just how to do that, how to begin to leverage this season to grow our communion with God. Now, honey, what stands out to you most about this story?
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful story, and it's perfect timing for the situation we're in right now with the quarantine, and what a unique season we're in. I love the idea of just a heart at rest. This is a beautiful story and a peaceful picture of Mary sitting at Jesus' feet and just being with him. And even though there's a hustle all around her, she's able to calm herself and sit there and soak in his presence. I think when we go before Jesus, we can lay down our lives, we can lay down our dreams, our hopes, and this season has kind of been a reflective season for us. I think you start to realize how busy life can be and how peaceful it can be when we just slow everything down and spend time with the Lord. I think one verse that stood out to me in the study of this passage is in 1 Peter 3, and it says, instead, your beauty should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. And it goes on to say, you are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. I think so often the time and when we spend time in the presence of God, it can really quiet our fears. We can be rested and find peace and joy in those times. What would my life and your life look like if we took this time while we're in this weird season in our country and world, really, to just reflect on our life? If we slowed down and spent time with Jesus, sitting at his feet in his presence. There's a quote I wanted to read you that's so good. I loved it. It's by a guy named Andrew Murray, and it says, humility is perfect quietness of heart, is to expect nothing, to wonder at nothing that is done to me, to feel nothing done against me. It's to be at rest when nobody praises me and when I am blamed or despised. It's to have a blessed home in the Lord where I can go in and shut the door and kneel to my Father in secret and am at peace as in a deep sea of calmness when all around and above is trouble. I think when we can really find that rest in the Lord, we really find that there's so much fruit that comes out of that. When we walk around after we have that special time with the Lord, we let off the fragrance of Christ. There's a verse in 2 Corinthians that talks about we are the aroma of Christ. And the more time we spend in his presence and find that rest, the more time we let off the aroma of Christ. And the world needs some peace right now. There's so much fear and uncertainty, and if we can spend that time with the Lord, there is great hope that we can offer.
Yeah, that's so good. And what we want to do is just encourage all of us to add a little more Mary to our life. Both women brought strengths in who they were and their personalities, and the drivenness and the attention to detail and trying to be there for everybody was a wonderful trait of Martha. But in this season where we're all right now quarantined, we're staying at home, how could we add some of Mary to our life that would really set us up to have a deeper even sweeter relationship with Jesus. Thinking back just a few weeks ago, my life, and I'm prone towards activity. I'm prone towards action. It's kind of who God's wired me up to be. But I'm just thinking like Monday and Wednesdays, I was coaching little guys wrestling in our community. Tuesdays, we had small group. I tried not to add a fourth day, but every now and then would have a meeting in the evening. I was trying to work out with a guy at 5:30 in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and just lots of activity. Now things have slowed down, and one of the things I'm enjoying is just a deeper, sweeter rhythm of more time with Jesus. So let us give you quickly 3 actionables, 3 ideas for you to add a little bit of Mary to your daily lives right now. So first thought is this. We want to encourage you to dive into regular daily devotions. Regular times with Jesus. That looks a little different for all of our lives, depending on our life stage and the activity of our households. But time with Jesus. What are we doing right now? Well, one of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm doing a through-the-year plan with YouVersion, YouVersion, YouVersion. And you can download that app. They have hundreds. No, they have thousands of Bible reading plans. Some of them are 5-day plans or 10-day plans or 21-day plans or a month or a year. And every morning at this kitchen table right over there, I just sit down and I spend time with the Lord. How do I do it? Well, the way I do it is I take a little bit of time in prayer just to sort of get my thoughts focused on the Lord. And then I do the reading. Right now it has me reading either a proverb or a psalm. It has me reading 1 or 2 chapters in the New Testament and generally 2 chapters in the Old Testament. And I take that 20 minutes or so and I read. And at the end of that, you might be a journaler. That's a great thing to do. But I take time to just reflectively pray. And every day, the Bible says that faith comes by hearing and hearing the word of God. Every day it just feels like the Lord adds a few more bricks on the foundation of my life in a relationship with Christ. And day after day, just his strength, his wisdom, his direction, his heart, his priorities, his values. He's, loading those into my own heart and my own life. And so we want to encourage you, jump onto YouVersion or something, start a Bible reading plan and leverage this time of being at home to spend more time with Jesus in that way. A second one that we're going to say, and you do the third one, is just we want to encourage you to think about if you're in a family context or a marriage context, we want you to think about family devotions. Now, I know that's intimidating. You're like, I didn't go to Bible school. That's why we hire you pastors. But we want you to think about family or even spouse devotions, or maybe it's calling a friend. But taking time, and the rhythm we look at is maybe just 2 times a week. We're all still doing things. For us to get our 4 kids around the table and get them focused, that takes a little bit of commitment and energy. But I'm going to send you tonight at 7:30 p.m. in your email inbox what we're doing as a family. I love it. It's just we're walking through 10 little simple Bible stories, and we ask a few questions at the end of those. And we get our boys. We ask them questions. And it's been some of the most profitable times to just talk about the hard issues as it relates to God, to talk about questions we have, to talk about how faith actually works in practical living. And that's been such a great way to repurpose some of the margin to just lead our children to their own destinations that God has for them in their relationship. And the third one, honey, why don't you share that?
Yeah, I think the third one is just going on a walk and enjoying the outdoors in this time that we're inside a lot. Now, it'll be nicer when the weather's a little bit better. But getting outside is so good for our souls, and sometimes just taking time to pray and walk and just think about who God is and talk to him outside is a great way to connect with God.
Yep. So we call it the old walk and talk. Mental health professionals are telling us you're going to do better if you get outside and just enjoy some of that. But talk with your spouse if you have one. Yeah, you can bleach your shoes. But just take some of those times to actually talk. If you're privately in the woods or around your cul-de-sac, don't look like a weirdo talking out loud if all your neighbors are out doing the same thing. Yeah. But just take time to talk with the Lord, and your endorphins will get going. And it's just a wonderful, precious way to have a little bit of Mary in your life, spending time at Jesus' feet on the move. Yeah. I'm going to close with this. One of the heroes of my life is a young guy named Eric Agoja. And I met Eric in Kenya, almost 20 years ago. And Eric was a high schooler at the time, had an incredible heart for God, had a really difficult life story. And the Lord just put something deep in my heart for him. And so I began to sponsor him, eventually to go on his own discipleship training school with YWAM. Now he's a leader with YWAM. And he wrote something this week that I think is just so on the point with this Mary thing. He wrote, Celebrating unexpected sabbatical gift from on high. What a beautiful time just to be. I truly needed this, just to minister to my inward being and to preach to my own heart, because this present world is passing away. I love how the Lord is taking away our highest loves, and in some cases, shutting down all the idols of our hearts, from the pulpits to the theater, from the gym to the classroom, from the economy to friendships, so that for once we can stop being human doing and become human being, just being at home and focusing on ourselves, focusing on our loved ones, and focusing on this one thing, the gift of a greater relationship with Jesus Christ. So this week, would you be a little bit more Mary? Keep doing the Martha things, because that's part of the rhythm of all of our lives. But would you think, how can I devote a little bit more time to growing closer to the Savior who loves me, who is for me, and who will lead all of us through this present crisis? We love you, we're praying for you, and we look forward to hearing how God will continue to be at work in your life. Have a great week. You wanted to get it in, but you didn't know. Bye, everyone.